let's get into talking about the drummer. So if you previously used Logic 10, then you're probably already familiar with the drummer. But starting in Logic 11, the drummer has gotten some bandmates and is now part of the session players. So everything that you used to think about as the drummer and drummer editor pretty much now applies to all the session players, as in the drummer, the keyboard player, and the bass player. So right now, with Logic Pro 11, it still pretty much works similar to how the drummer works. You add a drummer track to the project or a session player track to the project. It will give you an 8-bar region for that instrument, whether it's drums, piano, or bass. And then you can go into what used to be called the drummer editor, is now the session player editor. And you can manipulate the parameters to tell the instrument what to play. Now, there are going to be parameters in there that you can change as far as, for the piano, what the right hand is playing versus what the left hand is playing, or in the case of the drums, whether you want the pattern to use hi-hats or cymbals or toms, and what you might want the kick or snare doing. And the nice part about it is you can either manipulate the parameters to come up with a unique part, or you can have, say, the kick and snare follow another instrument in your production, like say the bass or guitars or something like that. So you have a couple different options to use for all of the session players to have them use the rhythmic information in one of the other tracks in the project to get the timing and groove, and then you can manipulate them as far as what they're playing with the parameters inside of the session editor. So the process is you add a session player track to the project. The key command for that is going to be Command Option U. Once you press that key command, it's going to basically ask you whether you want to use a drummer, keyboard player, or bass player. And from that window, you can select what drum set or what keyboard or what bass you want to use as far as the sound and genre goes, and create a new track. You can also choose your instrument inside of the session editor as well. So let's go ahead and look at that in detail and talk about the session editor and how it's now laid out differently from what the drummer editor used to be. So right now in this project,
Track 8 Neo Soul, Solo, Group.
I have this drum track here, and I'm just going to go ahead and delete this.
Cancel button. Delete default button. Tracks delete.
And I'm going to press Command Option U and add a new session player track to the project.
In new track, dialog. Create new track. Details. Drummer style. Audio output. Number of tracks to create.
And just hit Control to pause that. So if I VO left, because this puts it towards the bottom of the dialog, so I'm going to VO left.
Number of tracks to create. Help button. Device. 8. Open library. Output 1+2. Pop rock. Pop audio output. Drummer style. Details. Expanded. Disclosure. Audio. Mic or line. Group. Session player. Drummer. Selected. Group.
So you see, when we get to session player, drummer is selected. But if you interact with this,
session player. Drummer. Selected. Group. 3 items. Drummer. Selected. Radio button. 1 of 3.
You're going to have drummer,
Bass player. Radio
bass
button.
player,
2 of 3. Keyboard player. Radio button.
or
3 of 3.
keyboard player. And you can choose which of these 3 you want to add to the project. Now, in this particular instance, we want to add a drummer track. So
bass player, radio button, drummer, selected, radio button, 1 of 3.
Since drummer is already selected, I don't have to do anything. I just VO left back over to drummer, and I'm going to stop interacting.
On session player, drummer, selected, group.
And if I VO right,
audio, mic, expanded, disclosure triangle.
Now, when you get to this disclosure triangle, if it says collapsed, then just VO space on it. But if it says expanded, then it's already opened. So I'm going to VO right.
Details.
And you see it says details.
Drummer style.
Drummer style.
Audio output.
Audio output.
Pop rock, pop up button.
And now this drop-down menu is where you can choose your drum kit. So if you VO space on this,
menu, 36 items, retro rock, hard rock, punk rock, funk rock.
You have like all
psychedelic rock, funky songwriter.
These different styles of drums and drummer to choose from. And if you chose bass or keyboard, you'd see the different bass instruments or the different pianos to pick from here. So I'm going to hit escape on this because
closing menu.
I'll show you how you can also do this. But if you wanted to select it here, you could just VO space, find the instrument you want, VO space on it, and it will select it. And then if I VO right,
output 1+2, pop-up button.
That just tells me we're using outputs 1, 2 on my interface, which is generally what we're going to do most of the time, so that's fine. So I'm just going to jump to the bottom of this window with VO end. If you're on a laptop, that's going to be VO FN and the right arrow.
Create default button.
So I'm going to VO space on create.
Closing dialog track 7 full strings plus group.
And that should put a new
Track 8 SoCal group.
drummer track in the project. And there you see track 8 is
Track 8
SoCal,
SoCal group.
right? And so I'm going to solo this
Toggle
drummer
channel strip solo
track for
on.
now.
1 bar 1 beat 1 division 1 tick.
I'm going to do control
9 bars 1 beat 1 division 1 tick.
end and
1 bar 1 beat 1 division 1 tick.
control home. Make sure we have that region selected. So you see we have a region that starts at bar 1, ends at bar 9. So that is an 8-bar region. So every time you create a session player track, you're going to get an 8-bar region. And as you need to, you can add more regions to the project or key commands to add a new region. There's also key commands to just populate the entire track with regions as well. All right, so
Track 8 SoCal.
now that we got this drummer track here, let's stop interacting with the tracks group. And that tells us we can't stop interacting anymore, so I'm going to VO right.
Session player group.
And this is a session player group. Now, if you VO right and there's nothing there and you don't see the session player editor, you can press the letter E to make that visible. Because so long as you have a session player track selected in the tracks header, then pressing letter E will show you or hide the session player editor. All right, so let's interact
Session player group.
with the session player group, which is a session player editor.
In session player group. 3 items. Session player.
And in here,
Session player toolbar.
we have the toolbar as I VO right,
Session player group.
and the session player group. And that's the one we're looking for. That's the one that is going to have all the parameters that we're looking for. So let's go to the session player group.
In session player group. 7 items. Session player contents group.
Now, this section here is laid out in a couple of different groups. So if as I VO right,
Editor radio group.
we have the editor group, and this is where we can choose main, details, or manual. And as I VO right from here,
Acoustic drummer. Session player pop-up button.
acoustic drummer. This is a pop-up button where we can choose our drummer or keyboard player, bass player from within the session player editor. So if you didn't do it when you press Command Option U to add a track to the project, you can do it right from within the session player editor. Now, in previous versions of Logic, this used to be in the library, so you used to have to go in the library to choose your drummer and then come back in here to edit it. But now you can just come directly into the session player editor, change your drum kit if you want to, and also start manipulating the parameters. So we got that.
Perform again button.
We got perform again. This is if, let's say, you copy a drummer region, paste it somewhere else in the project, but you don't want the same exact performance, you can hit the perform again button, and it will generate a new performance for that region that you have selected.
40% complexity vertical
We
slider.
have complexity and
86% intensity vertical slider.
intensity. And this used to be the XY pad in the previous version of the drummer editor. If you remember, you have to hit VO Command Accent to activate it, and then use VO left and right to adjust the complexity, like how simple or how complex the rhythm was. And you'd also use VO up and down to manipulate how soft or how loud the drummer plays. So instead of that being that situation, now we just have 2 sliders, and we can just interact with one slider and adjust it, interact with the other slider and adjust it. So one slider is complexity and how simple and complex things are. The other slider is intensity. All right, as we VO right,
Main editor group. Main
we
editor
end up
group.
at the main editor. So you just want to think of this section as 3 main sections. You're going to have your editor radio group, the middle section that remains the same, where you can choose your drummer, perform again, complexity, and intensity, and the main editor, which is where we are now.
Main editor
The
group.
main editor group, and if I VO left,
8640 perform acoustic drummer. Session editor radio group.
the editor radio group. Depending on what you select in the editor radio group is going to determine what shows up in the main editor group. And then everything in between is just always going to be the same no matter what's going on. So if I VO right,
Acoustic drummer.
you
Session player
see
pop-up button.
we have acoustic drummer,
Perform again button.
perform again,
40% complexity vertical slider.
complexity, our complexity slider,
86% intensity vertical slider.
our intensity
Main
slider,
editor group.
and the main editor group. So the stuff between the editor radio button group and the main editor group is pretty much always going to remain the same. So let's VO left,
8040 perform acoustic editor radio group.
editor radio group, and let's interact with this.
In editor radio main selected radio
So
button.
we have
1 of 3.
main,
Details radio button. 2 of 3.
details,
Manual radio button.
and
3 of 3.
manual. So
Details main selected radio button. 1 of 3.
main is selected by default, and this is where you're probably going to be spending most of your time, is because main is where we can choose the different elements of the drum kit and what patterns we want them to play, or whether or not we want them to follow something else. If it was, say, the keyboard player, that's main is where you choose, say, what the left hand plays versus the right hand and all that kind of stuff. Details is, in the case of the drummer, is where we can choose some fine-tuning stuff like adjusting dehumanization, the ghost notes, and how open or close the hi-hat is, percussion, stuff like that. And then manual is where you can play in your own patterns in a step sequencer style layout. And we'll talk about that a little bit more later. So we're going to leave this on main for now.
Auto editor, radio group, acoustic drummer, session player, pop-up button.
And if I view right, you see it says acoustic drummer, and this is where we can choose our instrument, right? So because this is a drummer region, we can choose the drum kit we want. So I'm going to VO space
acoustic
on
drummer
this.
in scroll area, 28 items, type.
And now whenever you VO space on one of these, it brings up this new window, and you can just VO space or VO left or right or VO up or down through these windows and make a selection. And then you got to hit escape to close them. So
acoustic drummer, change patch, heading rock, pop rock, retro rock, hard rock, punk rock, funk rock, psychedelic, heading song, funk, pop song, experiment, root song, 60, roots brush, pop brush, heading alternate, indie pop, indie disco, indie rock, garage rock, heading R&B, modern R&B, neo soul, toggle button.
Neo soul is what we're looking for.
Selected.
Gonna select that and hit escape.
Acoustic drummer, session player, pop-up button.
Now
1 bar, 1 beat, 1 division, 1 tick.
We're on the neo soul drummer. And same deal, if I VO right.
Perform again, button.
Perform again.
53%, complexity, vertical slider.
Complexity.
100%, intensity, vertical slider.
Intensity.
Main, editor, group.
And now we have the main editor. So let's take a look inside the main editor.
Main, editor, group, main editor, group.
The main editor is broken down into two subgroups, the main editor group,
main panel, group,
and the main panel, right?
Main editor,
and
group.
if we go into the main editor,
group. 4-item system selection, group.
We have system selection, and this, if we interact with
system
it,
selection, group. 3 items, hi-hat closed, selected, toggle button.
This is where we can choose between hi-hats,
crash cymbal, toggle
cymbals,
button. Low tom, toggle button.
or toms, right? So we can choose whether we want our pattern to use a hi-hat, cymbals, or we want to put some extra toms in there. And if we stop interacting with this group,
system selection, group,
and VO right,
pattern 2, systems pattern, pop-up button.
You see system pattern is set to 2. So this is where we can choose the pattern that we want, or hi-hats, or crashes, or toms to play.
Accent selection, group.
Then we have accent selection. This is where we can choose
in accent selection, kick, selected, toggle button.
Kick,
snare, selected, toggle button.
Or snare. If you notice, both the kick and snare are selected. And stop
auto accent selection, group, pattern 3, following rhythm from follow, chord rhythm.
This tells us that the kick and snare are using pattern 3. And this is also where we'll be able to choose to have the kick and snare follow another track in the project, or follow the timing of the chord track if there's a chord track in the project. I'm going to hit Command U to set a cycle range around the selected region, which is our drummer region. So let's VO left.
Accent selection, pattern 2, system selection.
We'll go back to system selection. Let's interact
system selection.
with this.
Hi-hat closed, selected, toggle button.
And
1 bar, 1 beat, 1 division, 1 tick.
Right now it's on hi-hats.
Crash cymbal, toggle button.
But we can
selected crash cymbal, toggle button.
Switch it to crashes.
Low tom, toggle button.
Or
selected low tom,
put a
toggle
tom
button.
in. So
crash cymbal, toggle button.
Hi-hat
closed, toggle button. Selected hi-hat closed, toggle button.
So we got a hi-hat in here now.
Auto system selection, group, pattern 2, systems pattern, pop-up button.
And I stop interacting with the system selection and VO right over to
systems pattern 2, systems pattern, pop-up button.
Systems pattern. So if I VO space on this,
pattern 1, 8 items, pattern 1 button.
You see we have 8 different patterns we can pick from, right? So we VO space on pattern 1.
Pattern 1.
That's the hi-hat pattern.
Pattern 2 button. Pattern 3
Go
button.
to pattern
4 button.
4.
Pattern 4.
You see the hats are changing.
Pattern 5 button. Pattern 5. Pattern 6. Pattern 7 button.
Go to
Pattern 8
pattern
button.
8.
Pattern 8.
So that's how you can choose what pattern you want to use.
Selected. Pattern 8 button.
I'm going to go back.
Pattern 2 button.
This is the one we
pattern
started
2.
with. Pattern 2. And once again, we got to hit escape.
Pattern 2. Systems
close
pattern.
that list. And now we can stop playback with the spacebar. All right. So the same concept would apply if you were to select the cymbals or toms. All right. So I'm going to play this again.
4 beats, 4 divisions, 136.
And this time we're going to switch it over to
system selection group. In system selection group. 3 items,
graph.
closed. Selected. Toggle button.
So I just VO left over to system selection, interact with that.
Crash symbol. Toggle
and
button.
Now I'm going to VO right over to crash symbol. I'm going to select that.
Selected crash symbol. Toggle button.
Stop
Auto system selection
interacting.
group.
VO right.
Pattern 3. Systems pattern. Pop-up button.
Pattern 3.
Pattern 1. 5 items. Pattern 1. Pattern 2. Button.
So we have
Pattern
pattern
1.
1, pattern 2, pattern
Selected.
3.
Pattern 3. Button.
Let's try pattern 3.
Pattern 4. Button.
Pattern 4.
Pattern 4. Pattern 5. Pattern 5. Button. Pattern 5.
So you see we only have like 5 patterns for the cymbals, as you can see
Pattern
here.
5. Systems pattern. Pop-up button.
I just hit escape and then I hit space to stop playback. So now let's VO left back over
System selection.
here.
In system hi-hat closed. Toggle button. Selected hi-hat
leave
closed.
this
Toggle
on
button.
hi-hats
Out of
for
system
now.
selection. Pattern 2. Systems pattern. Pop-up button.
And pattern 2 is fine. All right, so let's VO right.
Accent selection. Group.
And we're gonna do accents. And this is the kick
In accent selection.
and
Kick.
snare.
Selected. Toggle button.
So kick
Snare. Selected. Toggle
and
button.
snare. You notice it says they're both selected. I'm gonna just start playback
4 beats,
here.
4 divisions, 130 ticks.
And if I VO space on kick,
Kick. Toggle button. Kick. Toggle button.
it's unselected. And you see we don't have any kick in our pattern right now.
Snare. Selected. Toggle button.
If I VO
Snare,
space
toggle
on
button.
the snare, we don't have any snare in our
Kick. Toggle button.
pattern.
Snare. Toggle button. Kick. Toggle button.
Turn the
Selected
kick
kick.
back
Toggle button.
on. So now we only have kick, but no snare. So if you turn them both off,
Kick. Toggle button.
it's a good way to have just cymbals for like an intro, or if you want a section with just some hats or some ride cymbals or something like that going on. You just come in here and turn the kick and snare off. Now, it doesn't turn them off in the fill. So if you don't want them in the fill either, you just have to turn the fills off. And we'll talk about the fills in a minute. But let's turn the kick
Selected kick. Toggle button. Snare.
and
Toggle
the
button.
snare
Selected
back
snare.
on.
Toggle button.
And we'll stop interacting with the
Out of
accent
accent selection. Group.
selection group. And we'll VO right
Pattern 3. Following rhythm from follow. Chord group.
over
Accents
to
pattern. Pop-up
pattern
button.
3. And this is going to be the same deal. We're just going to VO space on this.
Pattern 1. 9 items. Pattern 1. Button.
It's going to bring up a list of patterns.
Pattern 2. Button. Selected. Pattern 3. Button. Pattern 4. Button. Pattern 5. Button.
So pattern 5.
Selected.
So you see it's giving us a different pattern than
Pattern 4. Button. Pattern 3. Button. Pattern 2. Button.
pattern
Selected.
2.
Pattern 3. Button.
Pattern 3
Selected.
where we started.
Pattern
And
4.
if I
Pattern
keep
5. Button.
going.
Pattern 6. Button. Pattern 7. Button. Pattern 8. Button.
Now where this gets interesting,
Scroll area. Scroll area.
you have this scroll area at the bottom. If I interact
In
with
scroll
this,
area. Heading follow rhythm up. Chords.
you can have it follow the rhythm of your chord track.
Chords. On. Switch.
And so that's where you turn that on if you want it to follow the rhythm of your chord track. In this case, it won't really make much of a difference because I don't have any chords in the chord track in this project.
Track. Off. Track. Pop-up button.
But now tracks, you see it's off and it's a pop-up button. So if I VO space on
Menu.
this,
26. Steinway grand piano.
I can have it follow another instrument in this project, like the piano, for example.
Closing menu. Steinway grand piano. Track. Pop-up button.
Or
Menu. 26. Fredless gate. KK Star beat. Guitar 1L.
let's have it follow the
Closing
guitar,
menu.
for
Guitar
example.
1L. Track. Pop-up button.
And
Menu. 26 items. Check mark. Guitar 1L. Steinway grand piano.
you can use first letter navigation to jump to different tracks. I just hit S and it took me to Steinway Grand Piano.
Closing menu.
Again.
Steinway grand piano. Track.
I'm
Pop-up
going to
button.
hit escape on this for now.
Pattern 3. Following rhythm from follow. Chord rhythm.
And stop playback. And so that's what you have in this main section here is your cymbals and your kick and snare. So if we stop
main editor,
interacting
group.
with the main editor via
Main panel.
right
Group. Main panel. Group.
and go into main
In
panel,
main panel. 20%. 19.9%. Fill amount. Slider.
we have our fill amount,
Swing. Group.
swing,
49.5%. Fill complexity. Slider.
and fill complexity. So in Logic Pro's 10 drummer, you just had a single fill slider and it would turn up the complexity and the amount of the fill as you turn it up. But now you can have a long fill but keep it simple if you wanted to. So you can adjust the fill amount to make the fill really long, but then adjust
49.5%. Fill complexity.
the
Slider.
fill complexity to make it simple or complex independent of how long the fill is. So, and then
Swing. Group.
you have the swing group here, which you can
In
interact
swing.
with.
Group. 9.9%. Swing.
And
16th. Swing type. Button.
You can choose a 16th note swing
16th.
or an 8th note swing. So if you select this,
8. 8.
You
Swing
see
height
it
button.
switches for 8.
16.
Select it again, it switches back to 16.
9.9%. Swing
And then
slider.
you can use this slider to adjust your swing. So that's how we can adjust the swing.
Auto swing group.
All right, so now let's take a look at the fill.
19.9%. Fill amount slider.
We have a fill amount that's really short
1 bar 1 beat
here.
1 division 1 tick.
And I'm going to turn
Toggle cycle mode off.
cycle mode for a second. And so I just hit C to turn off cycle. And I'm going to
2 bars 1, 3 bars, 4 bar, 5 bars 1 beat 1 division 1, 4 bars 1 beat 1 division 1
bar
tick.
4 because I think there's a fill going into bar 5.
4 bars 1 beat 1 division 1 tick.
No, let's go over to bar
5 bars 6 bars 7 bars 8 bars 1 beat 1 division 1 tick.
8.
8 bars 1 beat 1 division 1 tick.
All right, so that's our fill as it
20%.
stands.
19.9% in slider.
We can adjust this.
39.9. 39.9%.
Take this up,
49.9%.
so now the fill is going to be longer.
8 bars 1 beat 1 division 1 tick. 7 bars 1 beat 1 division 1 tick.
Bar 7.
7 bars 1 beat 1 division 1 tick.
So now the fill basically takes up all of bar
59,
8.
69.9%, 79.9%, 89.9%.
longer.
7 bars 1 beat 1 division 1 tick.
And you see this fill is getting a little bit longer, but
Actions
it's
available.
not getting any more complicated. So let's
70, 60, 50,
take
40,
this
39, 19.9%.
back down to 20.
Auto slider.
And we're going to
Swing
go
group. 49.5%. Fill 49.5%.
over
Fill
to
complexity
the
slider.
complexity slider here.
7 bars 1 beat 1 division 1 tick.
And this
7
is
bars
where
1
we
beat 1 division 1
started.
tick.
All right. But now let's
In slider.
interact with this slider
59.5%. 69.5%. 79.5%.
and make this more complicated.
7 bars 1 beat 1 division 1 tick.
So you see that's giving us
89.5%.
more complexity.
99.5%. 7 bars 1 beat 1 division 1 tick.
So even though the length of the fill hasn't changed, the complexity
Actions
of the
available.
fill has changed. And that's the big difference that we have from Logic Pro 10. Let's set this back
69.5%.
to
59, 49.5%. Auto slider.
49.
Swing group.
And so that's a basic overview of the drummer.